pretty interesting, but a lot of the big fish names that we saw all throughout it through the last couple of days, it's been fun. It's been really, really entertaining just kind of seeing all these moves being happening. But um, but we're going to be shifting towards Major League Baseball. So we know, spring training's been really, really good. By the way, big league weekend out here in Las Vegas where we have the A's and we have the Reds. And then come the 18th and 19th, Rockies and the Royals will be out here. So joining me live via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard, talking about those New York Yankees. So I wanted a little of your take on this. I don't know if you've seen it, but I said this early on the show. So, I like Stephen A, and I do think he's very professional in some of his works, but I thought he was a little in the wrong on this. And so were a couple of people in ESPN. They mentioned about, New York teams. That's all franchises of which ones would win their championship first. Michael Kay, who has been a really good voice as a broadcaster for the Yankees for years, mentioned the Rangers. And every one of them wanted to put hockey in the back burner. And I was like, whoa, timeout. First of all, New York sports, I've been to New York 6 times in my life. I've seen how this, the media, the franchises, first of all, Yankees have not won since 2009. Yes, they have been in the playoffs, but there's been inconsistencies. If they're hit with the injury bug or the offense is not getting going where it's supposed to, then that's where they fall short. The Mets were inconsistent. They made it to the World Series in 15, but didn't really win up to their expectation. And then they won 100 games last year, and they lost in the first round. So it's like, and then, the Giants, they had one winning season in 10 years before Brian Dable came on. So, I look at this and I'm like, this Rangers roster's stacked. So I'm like, there's a possibility that the Rangers would win their first championship. What was your thought on that comment? Because I'm like, let's not put hockey on the back burner. That's just a little disrespectful.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how they do that in New York. Even though, when the Rangers and the Knicks both made the finals in '94, I mean, this place went crazy for it because they were playing at the same exact time. And, the Rangers winning was such a big deal because they hadn't won in 54 years. And yeah, for some reason, people still dismiss hockey. And then they also revere the New York teams as if they win championships all the time. And it's
right
embarrassing as a level-headed New York fan who realizes that's not how it is anymore or how it really ever was, because the only team who consistently won championships was the Yankees, and they haven't done that in a while. Right. And it's just funny to me that New York fans are so dismissive of hockey, but then they get into it once the playoffs start. So it's just weird. I don't understand.
And I looked at it. I'm like, look, y'all are lucky Mark Messier wasn't sitting in that desk, because then he would have really, really ripped a new one to every one of them. And it's like, come on now. Am I not the one who led the team to winning the Stanley Cup? And then it was just nothing. I mean, I just look at it like, do you know what kind of injuries hockey players go through? I mean, good God, in the 80s, we just saw somebody get their neck sliced, and yet they still were willing to play in the third period. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, and then they look at, this rubbery puck. Yeah, take a puck at 110 miles an hour.
Like that poor girl in Columbus who got killed.
Right. Yeah. And then come back to me with a sure shot answer. Like, come on. But, and it is interesting because New York media, we know it's dog eat dog town. We know that there's so much that goes on in New York media, but looking at the Yankees and recapping last year. So Aaron Judge, we know, is this big thing that New York has been looking for years and years. I've been in the part where they've had a great championship run. I mean, Curtis Granderson, Nick Swisher, all these big time names, and even the great Derek Jeter. So Aaron Judge wins, the MVP, and he breaks the all-time Yankee record. So looking at that, and the contract spoke for itself. Are there some concerns that draw you right now on this contract? Because to me, I know baseball, we're pretty spoiled in the no salary cap thing, but I still feel like if you're going to get a bunch of really consistent numbers with Aaron Judge, this is where, if you're the Yankees, you got to get over this hump.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think with most long-term contracts, the teams aren't really looking at the back end. They're looking at the first few years because they know that the last 4 years of a 9-year deal, 10-year deal, 11-year deal, Xander Bogaerts, did he sign a 12-year deal? Like, the people who make the contracts know that the I don't want to be fresh here, but the ass end of the contract isn't going to mean anything, and it's really the front. Um, they did what they had to do, but here's my thing. The day of the arson judge tweet from John Heyman, for those 7 minutes, I was completely panicked. And I already have anxiety, and that just ramped it up to an all-time high level.
Yeah.
But before I went to sleep that night, a wave of calm came over me because I thought to myself, and I became an obnoxious New Yorker in this moment, but I said to myself, why on earth would he leave this? He's
Right.
the guy. He is the guy. He has his own chambers in right field that people sit in with robes. And he could be the Derek Jeter of this generation, even if he can lead them to one championship at this point, because he's just so, it's not just the hitting. It's the defense. He did a perfectly fine job playing center field too when they needed him to last year, which is why he didn't win a Gold Glove, because he split time between the two positions. He also stole 16 bases. Like, he's just the guy. So why would he have even left? He's definitely just so much fun to watch. But yeah, don't worry about him after like 36.
That's what, yeah.
Years there, and then the last 4, he'll be DHing all the time, because we don't know how a 6'7", 282 guy who plays all the time and plays in the field all the time and has stayed relatively healthy the last few seasons, because a few of his injuries were fluky. We'll see how his body reacts. We don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron Judge, I could already tell when we're moving into a generation of baseball to where I love the personality part of him, because that it does speak New York to me. And I've been, the first ever game I've been to with Major League Baseball, I was 6 years old. I was at old school Yankee Stadium, and I was there when Jim Abbott was pitching and they were playing the A's. And it was fun, and you had a lot of great names. You had Tino Martinez, you had Paul O'Neill, you had Scotty Brocious, and that great 2001 roster that unfortunately, they fell short, but it was probably one of the greatest World Series we'd ever watched, even in our time, because so much was happening. But, I looked through that years and years beyond, and I think he definitely is the one that leads that charge, because you're not going to see this with Stanton. They pick up this contract, and he's a power hitter, but now you got 2 great power hitters. But, looking at this roster and looking at the lineup, because I do like Gleyber Torres, and I do like a couple guys, even Hishioka, and I really love the DJ LeMahieu thing, because you got to have somebody that's willing to spray the ball in the right field. So, when I look at this roster, I think one of the problems from last year is because, yes, they rely so heavily on the power, but yet we got to stick to the old school, get on base, score me runs, give me something that could at the very least get us past this, because, they win that first round and then they face Houston, which has clearly been one of their nemesises since the time of 2017.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate this roster? Because when I look at some of these, I'm looking for the best, to where it's a mixture of a lot of things. They do well contact hitting. They do well situational play. How did you evaluate this roster going into the 2023 season?
Well, I feel like DJ LeMahieu is a big wild card there, because he played in 125 games last year, but he wasn't healthy most of the year. And you could tell he wasn't right, because he just looked bad. If he's healthy and he's hitting the way he normally does, we don't need him to be the DJ LeMahieu of 2019 with the juiced balls, hitting 20-something home runs for the first time in his career. We just need him to be the guy that comes up, and if someone's on second or third, they're almost automatically driven in by him. I mean, he was insane that year. If we can get that DJ LeMahieu back, and then have Stanton stay healthy, Rizzo stay relatively healthy, because, Stanton and Rizzo, even though they were injured toward the end of the year and were spotty with their play, Rizzo had 32 home runs, Stanton had 31 home runs. And yes, it's a lot of home run or nothing with those guys, but if they can get LeMahieu going, if Gleyber can get going, he had a rebound year last year because he had 2 rough seasons, 2020 and 2021, after a really good 2019. And if he can get more consistent as well, But I agree with you with the not relying on the power thing. I'm hoping the shift rule helps some of these guys, but I know that the Red Sox pulled something on Joey Gallo where they had the outfielder move over because you can do that. You have to keep the infielders on either side of second, but the outfield, you can do whatever the hell you want. So there might be a way where teams are going to find a way to shift again on these guys and make it so they can't hit. But I don't know. I don't understand the whole not being able to hit the other way thing. Like, if you know they're going to shift on you all the time, why can't you figure this out in batting practice? You're a professional baseball player, for the love of God.
But you know what it is, and I've said this several times. I even spoke to Lauren Willen, who covers the Red Sox, and it's funny, and I hated bringing up bad memories to her, but the time when Robinson Cano, when he got shifted, all he did was throw a bunt down third baseline, and he still got a double off it. Like, and then Bryce Harper just recently did it. And it's like, are you finally figuring that out with the shift on how to beat them? Like, to be an all-time player? Like, I just look at it and I'm like, first of all, the getting rid of the shift was comical, because I'm like, look, now you're making it easy for guys like Joey Gallo and a lot of them who are just straight pull hitters, which, why isn't that, you have batting coaches for a reason. Why are they not implementing a lot of this, throw outside? Even if you got to give me a base hit, I don't care. Because, I played this game for years, and what I was always taught, and even playing, adult softball in a tournament, is if you're hitting that right side, right center field majority of the time, you are a tournament player. You are a guy that's consistent because you're scoring in runs. These are the statistics I care about: average and RBIs. Home runs, I don't care about, but if you do, that's fine. You're giving us more runs. But those two statistics is what really makes the player. That's why I love guys like, sometimes Nolan Arenado. I do love Paul Goldschmidt, which I'm glad he won MVP, because he's been the most consistent ball player in this league. That's why I'm like, nobody gives him a lot of love and credit for what he does. So, when I watched that with, the rule changes, and really kind of touching upon that, because now we have, the pitch count rule. Just earlier, Max Scherzer got a little debacled because of the balk thing, because he tried to do a quick pitch on Victor Robles. How do you see these rule changes, and at what point do players at some point get comfortable with all these changes?
Yeah, I personally like the pitch clock, just because it's making the games go faster and it's making guys kind of have to think on their feet, which is really funny because now they don't have 45 seconds to mull around the, mound. We saw Wandy Peralta do an entire strikeout in 20 seconds the other day because he just kept quick pitching the guy, and the guy was just like, so the pitchers might use that to their advantage, because that might actually really make the batters uncomfortable that they're moving so quickly. Right. But I like the pace of play so far, because I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I can't believe I'm watching a game for 3.5 hours. I'm an old time Sunday night baseball veteran, because I had the Sunday plan at Yankee Stadium. I was stuck at games so late that I'd call up my boss on the way home and be like, I'm just letting you know I'm on my way home. If I'm late, this is why. Most of the time I wasn't. I would make it into work, but the pace of play doesn't bother me that much. It's more everyone else complaining about it. So I'm glad that the complaints are going to go down. I feel like the players, it's good that they're doing this in spring training. I think by the time spring training ends, most of them will know what they're doing. You might see some hiccups in the regular season, but I'd say by the All-Star break, you're not going to see any kind of violations, because they're going to know what's going on with everything. And I think it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love the pitch count rule. I also do like, only in regular season play, the ghost runner rule, because of the fact of, first of all, these games have to be wrapped up. There's obviously got to be a winner, but at the same time, I love the fact that it improved to where it's a 2.5-hour game, because then it really does speed up the pace of play. Because first of all, you're not going to catch me at a 3+ hour game on a Tuesday night, knowing that I got to work at 3, wake up at 3:45 just to clock in at 5:30. Like, it's not going to happen with me. But, and I do like the adjustment changes. I still think, the shift rule is kind of comical to me, because I'm like, then you're just not allowing the players to challenge themselves to hit to the other side. You're just making it an easy play for them. But everything else beyond that, like, the ghost runner should only be used for the regular season. Postseason, like, I look at this with the same with hockey, because they do the 5-minute 3-on-3. If we
Yeah.
can't get a winner, then they go into shootouts, and then that gets entertaining. So I like that portion. But when it comes to postseason, it's pressurizing. That's the way I want to keep it, because that's what shows the boys from the men who the real champions are. So, evaluating this division, because we know the Yankees, they've got a lot of competition on their hands. They know that they've got the Rays that never seem to go away with their pitching staff, which for whatever reason always seems to have been stellar and has been like that since 2008. And then, the young Blue Jays, which we know there's a mixture of veterans, mixture of youngsters that they're still kind of getting into their own. How do you kind of see this division and, the arms race behind it? Because I know Boston, they're kind of falling into this hole where, they got rid of a lot of great players, but they're not really kind of fulfilling some ends that they want to be in. And then we know the Orioles, they're even going to be competition with them too, with their youth movement.
Yeah. I don't want to make any predictions because last year we did our roundtable, the AL East hosts of Locked On, and except for Ulysses of Locked On Rays, who picked the Rays to win the division, most of us were picking the Blue Jays to win. But we thought that the Blue Jays, the Rays, and the Yankees were all going to be bunched up. We figured Boston would be in there somewhere, and then the Orioles would be in the basement. And then the division turned out to be completely different than anyone ever thought it would be. The Yankees got off to that insane start, and they had that cushion. So when they had the worst August they've had since I was in high school, they were able to recover from it in September and not lose the division. The Orioles came out of nowhere to surprise the hell out of the Red Sox, who thought, well, all right, maybe we'll be in third or fourth place. They finish in last place. And the Orioles are like, hey, we almost made a wild card spot. Hi. Yeah. So I really don't know how this division's going to play out. I think health plays a factor, definitely. The Rays lost Glasnow for at least 8 weeks with the oblique injury, so that's kind of a big blow, but they always recover from that stuff. The Rays are getting as annoying as the Astros to me now. As a Yankee fan, I have to say, I'm just like, could you guys go away? Could you become Devil Rays again? I missed when you guys were the Devil Rays and the Yankees scored 13 runs in an inning on you twice in one season. Please.
Yeah, and even for their youth movement with Wander Franco and even Randy Arozarena, like, it's strange because, I mean, we moved past the year when they had Ben Zobrist, Evan Longoria, and a lot of really good names. But, the pitching staff never seems to change, even when they had James Shields and David Price and even Chris Archer for the time being. And then here you are with Tyler Glasnow and several other players. So
McClanahan, he's really good too.
Shane McClanahan's really good. Oh, I loved his stuff. And so I look at the Yankees pitching staff, and even with, Garrett Cole, because we know he's the one that's leading the charge. We know I've looked at the Yankees and I'm like, he cannot be Mr. Reliant all the time on that rotation, because we know Frankie Montas has been shut down. And then, you're hoping Luis Severino really picks himself back up. So, this rotation, and, I thought the bullpen actually showed some spurts. They got better. And, and so they're getting to that point where they're going to be a lockdown type of bullpen. But at some point, I mean, Brian Cashman really has to look at this rotation, and he may have to add up a few pieces. Could that be something he might address, in the trade deadline?
I don't think so. I think the rotation is okay because you have Cole, you have Rodon, you have Cortez, Severino. I mean, if you want to split the lefties, then you put it in a different order. Yeah. And then in the fifth spot for now, Clark Schmidt and Domingo Germán are fighting for it. But you also have some pitchers from the minors, other pitchers from the minors that you could possibly have for the first couple of months of the season. And I think if Montas is not okay by the trade deadline, maybe pick someone up for him. But I feel like the rest of the rotation is okay because he's the fifth starter. If he was the ace of the staff and he got injured the way he was, I would think the Yankees would panic. But, they're 1, 2, 3/4. And I always say this, Luis Severino, if he's healthy, should be his full name. Yep. But this is his free agency year. This is like the big year that he needs to really step up. Yep. And I feel like this could be the year that we finally see him repeat his 2017, 2018 performance, and hopefully he stays healthy. And if he does, that's actually a scary rotation when you look at it. If everything goes well.
Yeah, I agree. When everything goes well and they get healthy, because that I've seen it several times where that had always been that issue because of injury concerns. And then, of course, when someone goes down, in goes the inconsistency. There's not a balance between all of that. And that's where I was like, okay, somebody has to, at the very least, because I do love Nestor Cortez, and I think he's really built into his own. But I got to have guys that are going to be the next men up. And unfortunately with Frankie Montas, because I've seen a lot of his stuff in Oakland and seeing him, with the Yankees, he probably would be built in a better situation because guys in the rotation really are solid. But unfortunately, to not see his campaign this year takes a little bit of a dent. But hopefully, the Yankees can figure themselves out during the stretch, because I always look at it by the time we get into August and we get into September, when October baseball comes around, you're hoping you keep the consistency of that rotation, because that's the last thing that you would ever want to happen before playoffs start. Right. So, I've looked at this, and I've looked at payrolls, and I know the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Braves, the Astros, and even the Cubs. A lot of these premier franchises we know have the most money in their cap. And I look at a lot of the bottom tiers where you think of the Reds, the A's, and several teams. Of course, a lot of news right now is the fact that the A's don't really have a plan in Oakland. And I've said this over and over again. I live in Vegas, and I'm like, you've got to move this team here, because first of all, it's a better money market. Not to mention too, even if you're going to get a ball field going, my town, what we're based upon is football, baseball. Everybody wants to think differently. First of all, hockey was not a part of the plan, but yet Golden Knights happened and T-Mobile Arena, and it became a success.
Yeah.
In come the Raiders. We know Pro Bowl was a success. Now Super Bowl this year is here, and I've told people we're prepared, but I don't know if we're really that prepared for what's going to happen here. But with Major League Baseball, you're getting money. I mean, it's going to make Magic Johnson smile because he's close by to Vegas and he's watching these games here where the Dodgers are in town, and so looking and evaluating, payroll structures, because at some point, I mean, I've looked at this move, and nothing against Oakland, but outside of Alameda, you really don't have anything. And you kind of want to look into a different money market.
Yeah. I feel like this whole big market, small market, we can't spend money because we're a small market thing is a bunch of BS, because all these guys are billionaires. I mean, you're seeing it with the Padres. They're the 27th market in the country, and they're spending all this money, and they're kind of, shattering this myth that, we can't spend money. And they're just like, here, giving out extensions, giving out contracts.
I said this, what gave them the break was the fact that the Chargers moved out of San Diego. So now all that money is now being produced into the only team in San Diego.
Yeah.
And so it's like now they're able to spend money to go and re-sign Manny Machado, which honestly, good luck with that contract. But, Xander Bogaerts, and then at some point, Juan Soto. So San Diego is becoming now that money cesspool.
Yeah, but I kind of like it because it's making the other teams look silly when they complain that they can't spend. I mean, John Henry had the nerve to even complain about payroll, and it's like, you own Liverpool too. What are you doing? Like, you stop. You're not small market. Stop. I can't take it. And I love how they're all pissed at Steve Cohen for spending all the money he has. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're supposed to spend money to help your team win. How much fun would it be if we saw competitive teams out of Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, instead of having these poor fans be excited about baseball, but going in knowing that their teams have absolutely no shot of doing anything? I can't imagine being a fan of a team that goes into spring training knowing that unless all the teams above them completely collapse, there is absolutely no way, even with the extra teams in the playoffs, they have no chance of making it. It's so sad to me.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I think of teams that honestly, I think probably in the 10-year run, let's hypothetically speak, in the 10-year run, I feel like the teams that honestly could have a shot, especially in the position that they are in, if that was to happen, I feel like Milwaukee might shoot for it because of the fact of you got a partial ownership, even if, it's Aaron Rodgers who's partial ownership of the Milwaukee Bucks, and then you got the Brewers. He's just green. He's Wisconsin everything, and then you have the Cleveland Guardians, which hard for me to really get used to that, but Cleveland showed some spurts. I mean, we've all watched Major League, several times, and they
try like 500.
Yeah, so they never cease to amaze me because they've got a lot of real good youngsters, and I feel like they've been to the World Series once, in recent years. So they could be a team that can shoot for it. You just never know. And that's what I love about baseball is
Yeah.
there's always that state of the unknown. And then there's teams that get red hot we never even heard about. And then the other team that I think really could thrive on that, could send the narrative if they can is the Toronto Blue Jays, because we know hockey's obviously Canadian. We know this, but we've had teams where in the States, they've won championships more than what Canadian hockey's really done, because we
the
know
Maple Leafs haven't
Montreal.
done anything since before I was born. And I was born in 74. When did they win the last time? 67? It's been so long. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's been so long. And it's like, look, we know the Canadians are the Yankees of hockey. Okay, they've had multiple championships. And then when are we going to, at some point, see Toronto Maple Leafs really, get over the hump? I don't know. Yeah. They still have a curse on them. But, still, I mean, the Blue Jays, I loved it the year from, 92, 93 when Joe Carter wins that, World Series with the home run. And it just lifted everybody north of the border all on their feet, because
you saw what happened when the Raptors won.
Yeah.
My friend was working up in Toronto that year, and he took a video from his apartment building because he was up, I think, by Bloor Street in Toronto. And you just heard a roar of people. He was up on like a really high floor of a luxury building. And he's like, yeah, they're going a little crazy right now with the championship. And I was at a pool hall the night that Joe Carter hit the home run. And I had to explain to all my non-sports friends why I was freaking out. Because I at that point, I had never seen a walk-off home run to win a World Series. And it was amazing. And I said, well, this is what happened. I explained everything. They're like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. I was like, yeah, it is pretty cool.
Yeah. So, it is interesting because, in a couple minutes to wrap up, but the Astros, they won the World Series last year. And I know a lot of look, I've told people, I said, all right, look, I know the narrative. I was on that train for a bit. I still have my personal feelings of them, but Carlos Correa is not there in Houston. So he's missed out on that championship run. But I do love Jeremy Pena and a lot of those young kids. But it's just like the Astros. They've obviously got a target on their backs. A lot of teams in the American League want to really get past them because they become that face where they're great in their farm system. They're great at all of these things, and they attract a lot of free agents. How did when going into the playoffs, how do the Yankees really have to tackle this thing? Because I know in the American League, outside of the Central, because the Central is just so wonky, but you watch the AL West and then of course the AL East. How do they really have to tackle this on, in the playoffs? Because it's like the Astros still are the team to beat.
The Yankees need to have a different manager in the playoffs. Maybe they can rent someone for the playoffs, because they wouldn't have been swept if Aaron Boone didn't make some of those weird choices that he made. It would have been at least 2 games that the Yankees could have won if he didn't be Aaron Boone. And I didn't want him in the first place. He's a nice guy. I'm not going to say anything bad about Aaron Boone, but at this point, we really need someone else in there, because I don't feel like the Yankees will ever get over the hump with him as the manager. They could have the best roster in baseball, and he will find a way to screw it up in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my personal feeling about that.
Yeah, and I almost thought about this because, and I don't know if this really would work, but hypothetically speaking, what if the chances that if the money was, if the money spoke, that Don Mattingly would be back as a Yankee?
I know. I can't believe he's going to be with the Blue Jays. That is going to be so weird to watch. He was my favorite player growing up. Yeah. I wanted to name my first child Mattingly. Never had a child, but if I did, he or she would have been named Mattingly. That's how much I love that man. And to know that he's going to be like, the Marlins wasn't a big deal. Dodgers wasn't a big deal. I was happy for him, even though I was taught by my dad at a young age to not like the Dodgers, the Red Sox, or the Royals, because, late 70s kind of thing. But to see him in a Toronto uniform is going to be, I don't know. I feel like if he does come back to New York as a manager, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, even though he has a lot more experience now. But I feel like he would really be under the microscope because he's Don Mattingly and he hasn't won a ring, and the pressure of him needing to win a ring because they won the ring the year after he left. And I think it would be too much for him.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, he's known this New York franchise for years, and especially with the years that he's gone on with several championship teams. And, guys around him, they respect him. They know his play style and his game. I feel like too that it really could help with as far as their hitting style because
True.
it's not really always home run or nothing. I mean, there's got to be points where you got to score in runs, you got to get
Yeah.
on base, and so I feel like that could be that possibility. But I still think it would be a great watch because back into in pinstripes and back where it really all it began and started. So why not? But
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think he'd be fine because I mean, when he
yeah,
played with the Yankees, he was playing under a cognizant George Steinbrenner who still had his marbles, and he had to deal
yeah,
with that. So, yeah, I think maybe he could be okay because
yeah,
Hal's not like that. If Hank, God rest his soul, if he were the owner, he'd be more like his dad, where Hal is a lot more relaxed and not. He didn't get those George genes. He must take after his mother. So
yeah.
I think actually things would be better for Tom Mattingly if he came around now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then he would have, sole control. I mean, and you kind of have to have that as a manager because I look at baseball now and it's like, first of all, I don't want my GM making decisions of who I have in the lineup because
which is
first of
what's
all,
happening. Yeah.
yeah, because what was the old school of like you looked at the lineup, who had the hot hand, who the balance in the battery was in that lineup because ultimately it's like that's what built you championship rosters is because of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, first of all, you wouldn't even be telling this to Billy Martin in this time
I was
because Billy
thinking
Martin
about
would
that.
literally tell you, go F yourself. Like
That's
that's
exactly who I was thinking of when you were saying that. I was like, Billy Martin. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, no, there's so many great fond memories. I mean, that's interesting with the Royals. It's funny because I mean, like my stepdad, he played in high school ball and was really good. And his backup catcher just so happens to be the Kansas City Royals Hall of Famer Mike Sweeney.
Oh,
That was his
wow.
backup catcher at the time before a horrendous injury,
Mm.
really took him off sides, and then Sweeney goes and does his thing, and then he's an all timer, with Kansas City. But yeah, always love and baseball's always been a great pedigree. My mom's originally from Long Island up in Smithtown, and she grew up. She loved Craig Biggio. I mean, a guy that absolutely loved him, and she watched, the 86 Mets win the World Series at the time before, changing and going to pinstripes because the Yankee way just kind of felt really like the way to go at the time. So, but she loved it. She loved Gary Carter. She loved Tug McGraw and a lot of those guys there at that time. But yeah,
Yeah, but that was a rough time for me. My homeroom teacher that year was a Met fan, and he asked us the first day of school, "Which baseball team do you like?" And only two of us answered Yankees, and he tortured us that entire fall. You can still become a Mets fan. I was like, no, I'm not becoming a Mets fan. And then 10 years later, I was like, see, this is why I didn't become a Mets fan.
Right. Yeah. And it's like I'm not going to the other side of things. But I will say though, I love watching the Subway series with the both of them. But I mean, you have to admit, those dark jerseys of the Mets, anytime they play the Yankees, you just feel some type of way.
Yeah,
Every
because it
time on
takes you
the
back to the late 90s and early
oh
2000s. Like you feel
God,
like it's
yeah.
that era again. Yeah.
Piazza against Jeter, and yeah, I loved it. I could go on for hours, but hey. Really good talking with you, Stacey. Where can everybody find you for Locked On Yankees? Because this is going to be an interesting year for the Bronx, that's for sure.
Yeah. You can find us on every podcasting platform available. We're on YouTube. Me and my producer, Steve. We both have the same initials. I'm Stacey Gotsulias. He's Steve Granado. It's kind of funny. You can find us on Twitter at Locked On Yankees, all one word. We're on Instagram at Locked On Yankees, all one word. And I made a TikTok, but I haven't done anything on it yet, but I'm thinking during the season, maybe instant reactions to games I might put up on TikTok, which could be funny depending on what happens during the game.
Okay, seriously, I've literally have been tempted several times to making a TikTok because everybody's like, well, "You produce a great content. Why not get on TikTok?" I can't fall into it because I know a lot of people that get on TikTok and they never come out,
So
and
you
I'm
never
like,
do. No, I was scrolling
they
for 4 hours this morning. It's so bad. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm still tempted. It has not hit the thought on me yet, but yeah, I mean, at some point, I mean, yeah, especially for great, producing of content and the rest of it, I understand it, but I don't know. It's going to take a lot out of me to really, break that threshold. But
Right.
great talking with you, Stacey. Great stuff, and hope to see exactly how the Yankees do this season. Take care of yourself. Have the rest of your weekend there, and yeah, we'll see what this year really has in store for those Yankees.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is going to be interesting watching. I love baseball season all around. I can't complain. Anytime I go to the ballpark and anytime, especially out here in Vegas, we have the Aviators, but still, it is true because are they really low payroll teams? Which is kind of interesting. And I say this because the Oakland A's, they don't have a game plan. They don't really have a game plan in Oakland. And I keep hearing it with the mayor of Oakland talking, badly about Vegas. Look,